Most people with £100,000 in their pension pot think they've done the hard part. And in some ways, they have. Saving that kind of money takes discipline. It takes years of putting something away when you could have spent it. That's real. That matters. But there's a decision that usually happens in the first few months of retirement, often within the first week, that quietly costs people thousands of pounds they'll never get back. And almost nobody talks about it because on the surface it looks completely sensible. You've got £100,000 saved. Your pension provider tells you that you're entitled to take 25% of it as tax-free cash. That's £25,000, sitting there, yours to take without paying a penny to HMRC. So you take it. You pay off a few bills, maybe treat yourself and the family to something. It feels like a reward. What most people don't realize is that by taking that £25,000 in one go at 65, you've just made the next several years significantly more expensive. And you've handed HMRC a quiet advantage over the rest of your pension that will cost you every single time you need to make a withdrawal. And there's something else. If you own your home outright, and plenty of people who've worked hard their whole lives do, that £400,000 house you've been proud to pay off. It may not be the safety net you think it is. There are rules about care costs in this country that can unwind decades of asset building in a matter of months. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what £100,000 can realistically buy you in retirement in 2026, what it covers, what it doesn't, and where people quietly run out of road. And I'll walk you through a legal HMRC mechanism that lets you live on your pension pot for 2 years, bridging the gap before your state pension kicks in, and pay absolutely nothing in income tax while you do it. Let me paint a picture that might feel familiar. David is 64. He spent most of his working life as a manufacturing engineer. The kind of job where you're on your feet all day, solving problems other people don't want to deal with, and doing it well. He has a pension pot of £100,000. His mortgage is fully paid off. The house is worth around £400,000. By most measures, he's done everything right. But David is exhausted. He's been exhausted for a few years now, if he's honest, and every Monday morning he sits in the car park for a few minutes before going in, and he thinks, 2 more years of this. 2 more years. The state pension age in the UK is 67. That's the earliest David can claim his full state pension, around £12,500 a year under the current new state pension rate for 2026. That's a meaningful amount of money. But it doesn't exist yet, not for David, not until he's 67. So if David hands in his notice at 65, he has 24 months with no income from the government. None. Zero. Everything he needs to live on has to come out of that £100,000 pot. I remember sitting with someone in a similar position, going through the numbers together for the first time, working out what the heating bills, the council tax, the food shop would actually add up to over 24 months. There's a particular kind of silence that happens when the maths becomes real. You can have £100,000 in your account and still feel genuinely frightened. That feeling isn't irrational, it's just honest. Now, if David spreads that £100,000 over a 30-year retirement using a standard 4% safe withdrawal rate, he's drawing down around £4,000 a year. That's £333 a month. That doesn't cover much in 2026 Britain, let alone 2 full years of living costs without any state pension on top. So the question isn't whether £100,000 is enough for retirement. The question is whether it's enough to get David to 67 without running out of road. What does that actually look like, month to month? What does real life cost before the state pension arrives? So let's look at the actual numbers. David isn't living extravagantly. No holidays booked, no new car, no big plans. He just needs to keep the lights on and eat reasonably well. Here's roughly what that costs in the UK in 2026. Council tax on a Band D property runs around £1,800 a year in most English councils, some areas higher. Gas and electricity, even after the price cap adjustments, sits around £1,500 a year for a typical semi-detached. Food for one person shopping sensibly comes to roughly £3,500 a year. Add basic home maintenance, a boiler service, the odd repair, nothing dramatic. And you're already at £8,000 to £9,000 a year just to exist in your own home and eat. That's before a car, before any prescriptions, before Christmas. And here's what catches people off guard. David's house costs him money every single month. Not rent, he doesn't pay rent. But the house needs heating, it needs insuring, it needs maintaining. A £400,000 property doesn't sit there quietly generating income. It absorbs it. This is the house-rich, cash-poor problem. And it's more common than most people realize among people who've worked hard, paid off their mortgage, and done everything they were supposed to do. The house looks like wealth on paper. But paper wealth doesn't pay the gas bill. So David starts drawing down his pension pot to cover the basics, and the money moves faster than he expected. At £8,500 a year just for the essentials, he's burning through his pot at a rate that makes the next 24 months feel genuinely tight, and that's before anything goes wrong. Faced with that pressure, most people do what seems perfectly logical. They call their pension provider and ask about the 25% tax-free lump sum. A one-off payment of £25,000, no tax owed, straight into the bank account. It feels like breathing space. Don't do it. Here's why. Let's talk about why that £25,000 feels so right and why it quietly works against you. When you take your 25% pension commencement lump sum all at once, the money arrives tax-free. That part is true. HMRC takes nothing on that £25,000. It feels clean. It feels like a win. But here's what's actually happening in the background at 65. David has no state pension yet, no employment income, nothing coming in, which means his personal allowance, the £12,570 a year that every UK taxpayer can earn completely free of income tax, is sitting completely empty. 2 years of it. That's over £25,000 of tax-free space just waiting to be used. When David takes the £25,000 lump sum, he doesn't use any of that space. The lump sum is already tax-free by a different route, so it bypasses the personal allowance entirely. Those 2 years of unused allowance just disappear. Gone. Then at 67, state pension arrives. Around £12,500 a year. That fills almost his entire personal allowance on its own. Now, every time David needs to draw from the remaining £75,000 in his pot, it sits on top of the state pension and gets taxed at 20%. Every single withdrawal, that's the error. Not a dramatic one. No letter from HMRC, no penalty. Just a quiet, steady drain on whatever's left. Now let's look at what David could do instead. There's a mechanism called UFPLS. Uncrystallized Funds Pension Lump Sums. It sounds technical. The concept isn't. Instead of taking the full 25% tax-free cash up front, David uses UFPLS to draw smaller amounts directly from his uncrystallized pension pot whenever he needs money. Each withdrawal automatically comes with 25% tax-free built in. The remaining 75% counts as taxable income, but only if it actually exceeds his personal allowance. Here's how that plays out in practice. David needs roughly £15,000 a year to live on during the bridge period. He requests a UFPLS withdrawal of £15,000. Automatically, £3,750 of that is tax-free. The remaining £11,250 is classed as taxable income. But his personal allowance is £12,570. His taxable income of £11,250 sits below that threshold. HMRC's tax bill, £0. David keeps the full £15,000. He does the same thing the following year. Same result. Over 2 years, David has drawn £30,000 from his pension pot to live on and paid nothing in income tax. Not because of a loophole in the aggressive sense, but because he used the personal allowance he was already entitled to, during the only 2-year window in his life when that allowance was completely free. Compare that to the alternative. Take £25,000 up front bypass the personal allowance, then spend the next 20 years drawing from whatever's left, while state pension quietly fills your tax-free space every year. The difference isn't a rounding error. It compounds. One thing worth knowing if you go down this route: not all pension providers make it straightforward. I've been on calls where I've had to explain the difference between a UFPLS withdrawal and a full crystallization to the person on the other end of the line. They're often trained to walk you towards a standard drawdown arrangement by default. It's simpler on their end. You may need to specifically ask for the UFPLS option and be prepared to explain what you want clearly. That's not a reason to avoid it. It's just worth knowing before you pick up the phone. The personal allowance freeze runs until 2028. Right now, £12,570 is the number. Use it. Age 67. The letter arrives. State pension confirmed. For David, this is the moment he's been quietly counting down to for 2 years. Every month during the bridge period, he watched the pot shrink, steadily, predictably, but still uncomfortable. And now, for the first time since he retired, money starts arriving without him doing anything. The government deposits it automatically. Around £12,500 a year, just over £1,040 a month. That changes the feel of things considerably. His pension pot, after 2 years of UFPLS withdrawals at £15,000 a year, sits at around £70,000. Not a fortune, but it's still there and it's still working. If David applies a 4% withdrawal rate to that remaining pot, he's drawing roughly £2,800 a year from it, about £230 a month on top of his state pension. So his total income lands at around £15,300 a year, just over £1,270 a month. That's not a comfortable retirement by most people's definition. There's no long-haul holiday in it, no new kitchen, no generous budget for the grandchildren. But it covers the basics we went through earlier: the council tax, the energy bills, the food shop, without eating into capital, provided nothing significant goes wrong. And crucially, because David used his personal allowance carefully during the bridge period, the tax picture at 67 is manageable. His state pension of £12,500 sits just under the personal allowance. The small additional withdrawals from his pot push him slightly over, but only slightly. His tax exposure is minimal. Most people in David's position reach this point and feel genuinely that they've made it. The anxiety of the bridge period is behind them, there's income coming in, the house is paid off, it feels stable. And for a while, it is. But there's one number David hasn't fully reckoned with yet, and it has nothing to do with his pension. Residential care in the UK currently costs somewhere between £70,000 and £80,000 a year. Not a worst-case figure, not a London premium. That's the going rate for a standard care home placement across much of England in 2026. Most people have no idea it's that high. David doesn't think he'll need care. Most people don't. He's reasonably healthy, he's active, he's got plans, and statistically, he may well be right. Plenty of people live into their late 80s without ever needing residential care. But the ones who do need it tend to need it suddenly, and for longer than anyone planned. Here's where the house becomes a problem rather than a solution. David has been quietly considering signing the house over to his daughter. He's heard this is a way to protect the asset, keep it in the family, make sure it doesn't get swallowed up by care fees. It sounds reasonable. Plenty of people do it. Local authorities in England have a set of rules around what's called deliberate deprivation of assets. If a council believes you transferred property or money specifically to avoid care cost assessments, they are entitled to treat you as if you still own it. The transfer doesn't disappear from their calculation. They look at when it happened, why it happened, and whether care needs were foreseeable at the time. If they decide the transfer was deliberate, and they often do, particularly with property, they will refuse to fund your care based on that asset. Your daughter would then face a choice between selling a house that's legally hers or paying tens of thousands of pounds a year out of her own pocket. That's not a hypothetical edge case. It happens, and even without a transfer, the picture is stark. David's remaining pension pot at 75, after years of modest withdrawals, might sit at around £70,000. 1 year in a care home wipes it out entirely. After that, the local authority assesses his assets. The house is worth £400,000. He owns it outright. The assessment is straightforward. He funds his own care from that property until he's below the threshold. I'll be honest, I used to think of a paid-off mortgage as the finish line. I'd hear that someone had cleared their home loan in their early 60s and think, sorted. It took sitting with families going through care funding assessments to understand what that asset actually means in practice. A house doesn't give you options. Cash gives you options. Bricks give you the illusion of them. The hardest conversations I've been part of aren't about people who didn't save enough. They're about people who saved in the wrong form, who put everything into property because that's what their generation was told to do, and who arrived at the moment they needed flexibility with an asset they couldn't spend. So before we get to what you can actually do about this, how many of you are already planning to sign the house over to your children? Drop a comment below. I'm genuinely curious how many people are sitting on this plan right now, because the answer usually surprises people when they understand what the rules actually say. 2 things. That's all I'm asking you to do. First, if you're approaching 65 with a pension pot and you haven't touched it yet, stop before you call your provider and ask for the tax-free lump sum. Ask instead about UFPLS withdrawals. Ask specifically. Use that phrase. The personal allowance you have during the bridge period is worth more than the simplicity of taking everything up front. Second, if your retirement plan currently involves holding on to the family home at all costs, reconsider that now, not later. Downsizing from a £400,000 property to something at £250,000 or £280,000 puts £120,000 to £150,000 in liquid cash into your retirement. That money gives you choices. The larger house gives you maintenance bills and a care cost liability you may not see coming until it's too late to maneuver. Cash is flexibility. Property is not. £100,000 is enough. If you protect it in the right places, get through the bridge period using UFPLS and your personal allowance. Stop treating the house as an untouchable asset. Those 2 things alone change the shape of what's possible significantly. Thanks for watching. If this was useful, subscribe. There's more on protecting what you've built at every stage of UK retirement planning. This is Arthur's UK Retirement Guide, and I'll see you in the next one.